Welcome to NieuwRechts, or for English listeners, NieuwRechts. My name is Daniel de Liever, and today we're going to talk once again about the political situation in Austria. And I'm glad to talk again to Ralph Schoellhammer. Thank you for being here again today.
Thanks for having me, Daniel, and my sincerest apologies to your viewers and listeners. They must have grown very tired of me by now.
I guess not. We got actually a lot of positive reviews and comments on our last conversation.
Oh, good.
And we were kind of already joking about it, that in our last conversation we were talking about how we were going to get finally a right-wing coalition again in Austria. And let's just say that it did not really plan out as it did. And 24 hours later, I guess it collapsed. So we have something to talk about again. Let's start right there. Like last time we talked about how we're going to get a coalition between the right-wing FPO and like the center-right OFP. What happened? Why are we here actually now to talk about this?
Well, I would argue that with the exception maybe of partially in the Netherlands and in Denmark, the establishment parties, and in Sweden, I think you saw it a little bit as well in the coalition government supported by the Sweden Democrats they have there. But in Austria and in Germany and in some other parts of Europe, the UK and France, apparently establishment parties cannot jump over their shadow and allow the right-wing populists into any kind of governing function. It is quite frustrating. I mean, in Austria, it is to this point, by the way, not entirely clear why the negotiations ultimately imploded. Each side is blaming the other side and said they were too greedy, they wanted too many ministries. The main issue apparently was the Ministry of the Interior, which the Freedom Party claimed because they want to crack down on migration, and that would be the ministry that you want to have. But then the other party, the Conservatives, said they cannot have the Ministry of the Interior because there's all this Russian influence within the Freedom Party, and therefore there would be a security risk, which of course is a little bit absurd, because if you think that your negotiating partner is a Russian cutout, well, then you would not negotiate with them at all and not say, well, you can have some ministries, but not the Interior Ministry. So it's either one or the other. And by the way, this is something see also in Romania play out, where apparently not only the presidential election was annulled, but also the candidate who came out first in the first round, supposedly due to, if I remember correctly, Russian TikTok videos, has now been arrested. I mean, we'll see how this is going to play out. But there is something very odd going on, that despite the right winning all over the place, they never can quite get into government. And it reminds me a little bit of a medical condition. You go to your doctor and the doctor is prescribing some medication. But it seems that the doctor in this case would be the equivalent of the voter, but it seems that the doctor never prescribes enough of the medication. So it turns out that the 29% for the Freedom Party, or now the 20% for the AFD, it's not enough. I constantly get these emails where people say, oh, Ralph, what are you talking about? The FPÖ came in first. That's the first in history. And the AFD doubled their vote share. That's incredible. It's all true. It's all amazing and a historic first and all very good. But as long as you're not in government and in power and therefore can actually change policy, these are Pyrrhic victories that look good on paper, but you can't really affect policy all that much.
For sure. And I don't know if you agree with this, but I heard this theory that to me seemed quite plausible, at least, that there might be some corruption going on in the Interior Ministry of the previous governments with OFP, and that the reason that they don't want FPÖ to get access here is to basically make sure that you don't have a similar situation to what we now see in the United States with USAID and all these other organizations, where you can see clearly where all the money from the Democrats has been going. And there is this theory that basically something similar is happening with the Interior Ministry and the OFP. I don't know if it's actually true, but I've at least thought it was an interesting thought, and I'm curious what you think about it.
Well, I think that definitely is something to it, because even now in the new coalition government that was, by the way, announced today it's the Austrian traffic light coalition, if you want, between the Conservatives, the Social Democrats, and the Liberal Democrats. Exactly as what you alluded to, the Conservatives insisted once again, this time successfully, on the Ministry of the Interior. So one has to wonder, why are they so hell-bent on maintaining control over one specific ministry? So I do agree with that. Something doesn't smell right here. And the other thing is because they, of course, in this triple coalition, they are significantly weaker because they are now governing with two center-left parties than they would have been with governing together with the FPÖ, which is a right or right of center party. So they have weakened their own position. They've weakened their own room for creative policy making just because of the Interior Ministry. And if you're willing to pay such a high price, then what you get for it must be something substantial. So I think either it's corruption or a form of cover-up, of mishandling, for example, of information about planned terrorist attacks in Austria. So something is going on that they desperately try to avoid, to give up control over the ministry. So I think you're right. It's going to be one of those conspiracy theories that will turn out to not have been a conspiracy at all.
I guess we have to wait a few more years, I guess, until maybe FPÖ finally gets in power until we're going to find out actually what is going on. But I'm curious, what are the Austrian people thinking about this? What's the reaction to once again have the biggest party in FPÖ not being part of the coalition?
Well, the almost most ironic part of the story that I think your viewers and your listeners will also get a kick out is that one member of the coalition government is the Liberal Democrats, and they're really pretty much like the FDP in Germany. Right? So it's all about the budget and reforms and making things better, doing things differently. So the usual stuff that they say. But now that we know the actual coalition agreement, this is going to be personnel-wise with ministries and secretaries and the entire infrastructure of the people that you need to govern. It's going to be the largest government Austria ever had. They actually, I kid you not, they have to remodel parts of the parliament because the bench on which the members of the government sit, right, basically these chairs, I'm sure it's the same in the Netherlands and in Belgium, is too short. So they have to add on because the bench of the members of government is larger than it has ever been. And of course, Austrians are saying, so, and to be clear, this means, every new minister they have their own driver, they have their own staff, they have their own, the entire bureaucratic infrastructure. So this is going to cost millions of euros from a government due to the budget crisis in Austria. He's telling the people, well, you guys have to tighten the belt because there is no more money. So people are angry. We'll see how angry they are. It's usually very difficult to really get a rise out of the Austrians. But if this government is not getting A, things done, and B, can turn around the economic situation in Austria, we're still in a recession, you're entering a pre-revolutionary territory. And I'm not talking about, pitchforks and open fires in front of the parliament, but something as it happened a couple of weeks ago in Belgrade, in Serbia, where the government had to resign due to public protests. I don't think you can entirely rule this out. And I looked at the program of the new government today. It's one of these texts that doesn't have anything substantial in it. It's all we have to look at. We will make a working group. We will do, but there's nothing in there that you can actually. It's like trying to nail jelly to the wall, right? There's nothing substantial in it. So they don't really have an idea what they want to do because that's not because they're incompetent. Maybe they're that as well, but they're ideologically so far apart that it's almost impossible for them to agree on anything substantial, which will be a similar problem. Maybe not that bad, but a similar problem will be faced by Friedrich Merz in Germany in his coalition negotiations with the Social Democrats.
Let me ask you about the big elephant in the room, and that is immigration. I guess one of the reasons why all these right-wing parties in Europe, including the FPÖ, of course, get voted in, is this topic. But when I hear Social Democrats, I don't immediately think, this is the party that's actually going to be more tight on immigration. So what can people expect on this crucial point from this new coalition, you think?
And that's a key point. I mean, there will be some fiddling on the edges, right? So with the idea that you have to repatriate, let's use that term, criminal migrants and sharpen laws regarding asylum seekers, but none of this is really going to happen because the idea is, once again, and this is what also it says in the program, there needs to be a European solution. And every time a national government says there needs to be a European solution, that's a dog whistle for we're not going to do anything and just push the responsibility to Brussels, and Brussels is not going to do anything either. So the changes that people expect, like a substantial decrease in the number of people in the country, of non-Austrians in the country, that is not going to take place under that government. So the good news for the Freedom Party is Whether or not the next elections are in 3 years, in 4 years, or in 5 years, when officially the term of the current government would end, but you never know if there might not be a cause to call snap elections, they will definitely win a larger share of the vote. It's almost, I cannot think of any credible scenario why that would not be the case. And then we're not talking about 29%, we're talking about 35, 36, 37%. And that, by the way, is what's needed. I mean, you see this in Hungary. The reason why Viktor Orban can actually execute truly conservative policies is because Fidesz got 51% in the last election. The reason why Donald Trump can do what he does is because he was voted into office, right, as the president. So that he doesn't have he doesn't need a coalition. The reason why Milei can do in Argentina what he's doing is because he's the president, and he's not depending on a left of center coalition partner.
But then the question becomes, because I see a lot of European countries, including Austria, that are in real problems now. We see that things are changing much faster now, also, let's say, geopolitically, but also just in general. So you want strong leaders to actually make sure that your country is doing well. If you need to wait 5 years, potentially, for another government, do you think actually Austria, in a real sense, will not just be having to actually take years and years to actually make sure that this mess will be cleaned up, instead of actually doing policy that the country needs?
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is what I always tell people. You're absolutely correct. I always hear the exact argument that I just made myself, which is that, yes, it's really bad at the moment, but think about the next elections. That's when the right will have a really huge vote share, and then things will change. But as you correctly alluded to, lots of things can happen within 5 years. And the more you go to the wrong direction, the longer the way back is. I mean, there's this old joke. A Jewish friend told me about two people sitting in the train, and with every train stop, one guy is whimpering, saying, "No, this is horrible," until the other guy says, "Excuse me, sir, what are you complaining about?" And he says, "I'm sitting in the wrong train. And with every station, I'm getting further away from where I actually want to go." And this is precisely the situation in which the Germans and the Austrians find themselves. Yes, there was an attempt of a course correction. It did not happen. We did, so to speak, not change trains. So we continue to go into the wrong direction. And with every year, we are further apart from it. So the way back will be more exhausting, will be longer, and will be more painful. But I have to say, because I also got lots of mails, particularly regarding the elections in Germany, something was rigged, right? There must be something wrong, because nobody in their right mind would vote for anybody than the AfD or the FPÖ. But we must be careful not to get trapped in our own bubble. Unfortunately, for the time being, we are doing better in the realm of media, like you and NieuwRechts are, for example, doing. We have a stronger voice than we had in the past, but we are yet not at more than 30-31% when it comes to elections. People sometimes, I have the impression, are afraid of their own courage. If you take Germany for an example, which I think is a better example here than Austria, 82% of people say they're dissatisfied with the direction of the country. Yet they're going to get a government of the CDU, CSU, and the Social Democrats, which is the longest serving form of government the Germans had since 1945 or 1949 to be precise. So but it's because the people voted like this. Like this was entirely foreseeable. Mr. Merz made absolutely clear he's not going to enter into a coalition government with the AfD. So the only solution for the problem would have been to get as many votes as possible to the AfD, so that they would have been the ones to be tasked with forming a government, and then they could have, almost with the normative power of the fact, they could have told the CDU, listen, we got 26%, you got 24%, are you really sure you don't want to do this? And then they probably would have softened their firewall and all these other ideas. But it did not happen, because at the end of the day, voters didn't want it to happen. And now we have to live with the consequences.
Yes, I agree with you, especially about this bubble, because, of course, I work for NieuwRechts. We also, of course, have this bubble. I constantly talk to right-wing people, such as yourself. Of course, we also try to talk to people from more left-wing persuasion, although they're not always so eager to have a talk. I must add. But I think if you take the situation in Germany, I think people are also the hard truth is that for a lot of people that live, for example, in big cities, if you look in Germany, in Western Germany, life is still quite good compared to for some people that live outside of the big cities in Eastern Germany. Then you will feel much harder what's actually going on. And you see the same thing in the Netherlands. If you live in the big cities like in Amsterdam, then you have this bubble of progressiveness, of highly educated progressive people with a high salary that can just be in their own bubble. Of course, they're not going to actually be able to feel what's going on. They don't have the housing crisis. They don't have as much problems with the immigration that's coming in. So do you think something similar like to that is also happening in Austria?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we look at the numbers, there's a slight difference. The numbers in Germany, for example, show pretty clearly the reason why the parties for change, or the more revolutionary parties, if you want, both on the left and on the right, why they didn't have as many votes as they could have had is because the over 60-year-olds voted for the traditional parties, as you correctly pointed out, because they probably think they've got nothing to lose. If things keep on going as they do at the moment for another 30 years, they'll be fine. And another thing we have to talk about, and that's not the case, by the way, in Austria, that we have to talk about, is that young women. Young women below the age of 24 disproportionately vote for left-wing parties, for left and extreme left parties. And that, of course, starts to hurt the right-wing parties.
Yeah, you could say there's this gender gap, so to speak, between when you see actually that men have become more and more conservative, more and more right-wing. In many issues, you see this also in relationships, right? We also have a demographic crisis in the West. It's a problem. If you have a different view of how life should be lived, of course, it's going to be more difficult to find a partner. It's a whole different topic that I find personally very important. But do you think now in the Austrian situation that this kind of coalition is stable enough to sit at least for a few years? You're saying 3, 4, 5 years. 3 years is also still quite long. Do you expect that there are scenarios in which we might have elections in a year or 2 years, or do you think, sadly, that's not in the cards for now?
Well, the dynamic. This is the interesting thing about these dynamics. The dynamics are that this government is going to enter their governing period with already a significant disapproval rating. So none of the parties involved will ever have a benefit from leaving this coalition. So the less popular they get, the more they have to stick together. The only condition that would make snap elections likely is, as it happened in Germany, if one of those coalition partners would be at the risk of, when it comes to elections, entirely dropping out of parliament, like it would have happened and ultimately did happen with the FDP in Germany, so that they say they have to do the whole, they have to do new elections, because otherwise they cease existing as a political party. But you're right, this is, and I could not agree more. This is what I also say on a constant basis, is that the relying on, oh, well, this is just going to go on for a few years, but then we're going to have snap. I don't think that's necessarily the case. It didn't happen with the last election.
That's a fair point. Do you, we talked about how in society people are feeling, but of course I'm also quite curious, how have you talked to anybody from the FPÖ, how they are feeling in a situation where they were so close to forming this coalition and getting what they wanted, and now, for now, I guess it's gone. What you can tell us about this situation?
They have mixed. They're at least from what my sources tell me, they have somewhat mixed feelings, because of course there was the expectation of getting into government, but on the other hand, they have been very good in the role of being the opposition party, and now they are not just the strongest party in parliament; they're also the opposition party. So this, if you will, is almost a role the FPÖ was born for. So this is gonna, on the long run, but as we said initially, this is gonna work to their favor. But the question is it gonna be to the benefit of the country? And that's, of course, the issue I'm a little bit more concerned with. But for the party, this is gonna work out pretty well, because the government is massively unpopular already. The members of the government are massively unpopular. I'm not saying that they cannot turn the ship around. You never know. Sometimes people grow with their office. But if that is not happening, it's very unlikely that the people who voted for the FPÖ this time will not vote for them the next time.
It's a fair point. And I guess the last point I think I want to address, you said there that Austria is in an economic crisis at the moment, a recession. Do you think that this government is able to fix this on a short-term basis, or do you think that we have another recession for the upcoming years in Austria?
Well, all I can do is that I can take a look at what the program that the new coalition government just published says, and everything I see in there is just not very encouraging, because it does not address the structural fundamental problems the Austrian economy has. Energy prices are too high, there is too much regulation, there is too much bureaucracy, and you have all these coded terms in there, for example, closing down loopholes in tax loopholes. But the reason why people need tax loopholes is because taxes are so high. If you cannot do anything via loopholes, you pretty much have a very discouraging environment to do business at all. So once again, their main approach is to be more efficient in getting money from the taxpayers. But there is no real idea how to address the massive structural problems. And they talk, it's the usual things, green hydrogen and renewables and all of that. We have tried this in Europe now for 20 years, and it has failed everywhere. And it will also fail in Austria. There are also weird things in there, like we want to become a leader in space technology and artificial intelligence, which is, it's the kind of stuff an intern would write into or the ChatGPT, I guess, would write into a government's program, but there is nothing really substantial in there.
It could be worse. You could be like Sweden, who said they were going to be like the immigration superpower, right? That's what they used to say back in the day.
True. Well said. Yes, you're right.
No, but in all seriousness, I get your point. I think it is. It's ironic when you say that you want to compete on a very high level when you don't even have the basics to make sure that you have a stable society.
And there are also things in there like freezing rents in apartments and all these kind of things that we know there is a new model, and that model was tried actually more by Argentina than by the United States, that shows that in most, not in all, but in most cases, if you liberate the people from taxation and regulation, the economy will pick up. I mean, we see this all over the world. We saw it in Asia for the last 60 years. We see it in Argentina now, and I'm pretty sure we're going to see it one way or another in the United States in the coming years. This is not because Milei or Trump have a magic touch. I mean, these are just the iron laws of economics. If people have a sense that they can keep most of what they earn, they will want to earn more. And if they have a sense that most of what they earn is going to go to the government that they are not particularly happy with, they will either try to do things behind the back of the government, they will move their wealth out of the country, or they will work less. Because, and that's the situation in Austria, if part-time jobs only pay on average 200 euros less per month than full-time jobs, you would be crazy to take a full-time job. Why would you work 40 hours instead of 20 hours if you get a meager 200 euros more?
That's crazy. I thought it was better in the Netherlands, but this is even worse. Funny what you said about the housing. We have exactly this happened specifically in the Netherlands. We had our previous Minister of Housing, Hugo de Jonge, who has a very special talent, because he used to be the health minister during COVID, of basically screwing up everything he can. It's a real talent, I must say. And he introduced this law where basically there's a floor of how much the rents can be in the low to medium rents. And basically what happened, which of course he did not expect, is all the people that were renting out houses as a way of living, even people that had one or two houses, they just sold their houses, and now there's no houses to rent anymore. Yeah. Most people. So this is what you're going to get.
I mean, the idea that you can decrease prices by artificially restricting supply is absolutely crazy. And as you correctly point out, people will just stop sub-renting or leasing or renting their real estate, because it's the thing. Nothing in this world is charity. And that's true for homeowners, that's true for apartment owners, that's true for the guy who runs the supermarket. They want to make a profit, they want to make money, and good for them. And the idea of the government has that you can just step in and dictate the prices. And as you were correctly right, they tried this in Venezuela. They tried it in the former Eastern Bloc countries. It always failed. It always fails. They tried now with energy. They tried with electricity. Like, if the government could simply set the price, I always ask this question. I say, then why don't they set it at zero? If they say it makes no difference what the price is, then set it at zero.
Exactly. But it depends on what your goal is, right? If you look at Soviet Union, or if you look at communist China, they're very good at killing people. So this is also a talent, you must admit. So starving people to death, if that's your goal, then this is a very good way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, unfortunately, this is always my frustrating thing. I believe that a significant part of the population is also not aware of these economic causal chains, because it is always beyond me, as we said at the beginning of this conversation, why so many people, and yes, it's special demographics, that's all true, but at the end, it's what matters is what the polls show and what the elections bring, and that is that a significant number of people, 70%, 60, 70, 80% still want things to go on as they are, and they won't, right? They're going to get worse. But if people don't want change, they won't get change, and one can only wish them all the best.
That's true. Let's hope the situation gets better. Maybe like last time we jinxed that it basically that the government would form with FPÖ. Now I will just say, let's hope that the government will stay in for a very long time, and let's see how it goes. And I really want to thank you giving this update about the situation in Austria. Once again, where can people follow you if they want to read or follow your work?
I'm working on an updated Substack and everything, and I'll share that as soon as it's ready. Until then, just Google my name. That's easy. If your name is Ralph Schoellhammer, there are not that many around that share that name, so you would find everything that there is to know about me, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniel.
Also thanks to all our listeners and all our readers. Just like we were talking about, we are independent news outlet, so we don't get any government funding. Luckily, that's why we can be independent also in our views. So if you want to make this kind of content possible for the future, please consider going to our website and becoming a member of NieuwRechts. Or additionally, if you don't want to do that, you can also always just subscribe to our social media content. That also helps already. So thank you, and see you in the next one.
Thank you.